Morning, Todd Davis here from Dirt Bike Test Magazine. We're here at Glen Helen this morning on a beautiful Sunday, a little bit of wind. Apparently we've been getting some requests about new KTM chassis GP setups. A little background on myself so you can apply my specs to kind of what you're looking for. I'm a 50-year-old expert class racer in National Grand Prix Championship Series races and SRAs. I practice on the local motocross tracks like most of our guys. This is my fourth KTM 450 XCF. I had a 13, a 16, a 21, and now the 23. 13 obviously was completely different. 16 and 21 were pretty similar as far as setups. Those bikes were really easy to deal with. The chassis was really neutral. They didn't require a whole ton of work to really get them to work well for GPs. There was a lot of hype about the new bike when it was being introduced and stuff. Completely new bike from the ground up in 23. I got one pretty early, and while the bike is good, it has its struggles when it comes to high speed square edge bumps and that type of thing. And if you own one, you probably felt this. If the dirt's soft and the traction is good, the bike's like a scalpel. It has a very stiff chassis, it's very precise, and it works very well. But as soon as you start applying like high speeds, hard slippery hard slippery dirt with square edge bumps, it gets a little sketchy and a little harsh. It's a little bit difficult to deal with. So I've been riding the bike for about a year now, and these are some of the things that I found that work best for me. So also, I didn't give you my weight. I weigh 210 pounds, like I said, plus 50 expert racer in the GPs pretty much primarily. I do very little desert racing or anything like that. First and foremost, we'll just start from back to front. One of the things that I've always had problems with on all of my KTMs and pretty much any bike that I've ever owned, I'm a chronic brake dragger. I tend to overheat and warp discs. The KTM brakes in particular work really well. But the rear brakes for me, I've always had issues with warping the rear rotors, and I'll actually like the stock piston has a ceramic insert that I will break out, and I boil them, and there's all kind of issues just because of my brake dragging. So a couple things that have worked really well that I never used before this year was a Motormaster solid brake rotor, which was pretty surprising to me. I always considered solid brake rotors to be for mud only. And I kind of saw one on Dante's bike at one of the races and decided to try it, and it's been great. So it takes a lot of the grabbiness out of the brake itself, or it doesn't feel as powerful, I guess, but that's kind of what I want. I want to be able to drag it and use it more like a clutch than anything else. And then also a Nilo Concepts brake piston, which is a stainless steel vented brake piston that they sell, which worked awesome. And now I get good pad life, I don't warp the rotors anymore, and everything is better. The squeaking went down. A lot of the issues that I had with the brake have been cured by those couple of parts. Dunlop tires, we just started using the new MX 34s, which are interesting. The 34 seems to be at least comparable with the 33, which I was really happy with. So pretty soon we'll be trying an MX3S as well. On to gearing. The stock gearing is a 1352, I believe, which is really pretty low. This is the first year actually that the motocross gearing and the cross-country gearing were actually flipped. It was always the XC bikes had taller gearing, the motocross bikes had lower gearing, and with the 23 it was actually the opposite, where the motocross bike had taller gearing and the cross-country bike had lower gearing for whatever reason. So I dropped 2 teeth on the back. It seems to be good. Seem to have enough top speed for the majority of the races, other than like if you go to say 29 Palms, you probably just pop a 14 on the front and call it good. That place is really fast. Another thing about the new bike, if you have one, if you've been dealing with this, keep a very close eye on all of your chain guide, chain slider, that type of stuff. The stock components used to be good as a no-brainer for 40 hours, for the 21s and 22s and so forth. The new one, I barely got 16 hours out of my slider in particular before it was almost into the swing arm. So keep a really close eye on the slider and the chain guide. And basically what I did, I went to a TM Design Works one, which they just completed, and it seems to have fixed the problem. So definitely keep an eye on that, because you will ruin your swing arm if you're going off the same time frame that you did with your old bike. Another thing that was an issue with these initially, and they may have cleaned it up with the later models in the 24s, but one of the bearings in the linkage would walk out and cause some binding in the linkage. So when the bike is new, keep an eye on that. And if you have your shock off or whatever, and you really should when they're new, the bearings are pretty dry, brand new. You should take that stuff off and grease everything. And if you notice some binding after a few hours on your bike in the linkage system itself, one of the bearings is walked out. I had a pretty easy fix for it. If you know somebody with a bead blaster, which I have one myself, I was able to do a light bead blast on the surface of the inside of the knuckle with the bearing out, and then use some green Loctite and put that back in, and I haven't had any issues since then. So again, keep an eye on that. That's been a known issue with these bikes. On to one of the biggest things with this thing was kind of the twitchy chassis, which is interesting because all the numbers on paper make it virtually identical to the old one. But the added rigidity and the anti-squat stuff that they did with the back really always feels like the rear is overpowering the front, is what I got out of it. And really chased it for a long time. I had the best success with stock triple clamps with flush fork height. Seemed to help it tremendously. Still run a normal sag in the back. I tried some different numbers with that and always landed at 105. What really helped this bike, we went to a 24 offset extra triple clamp. One, to increase the comfort level, and two, to get the front end to calm down a little bit, especially at speed. At 29 pounds, this bike was pretty big handful with that front end. And the bigger offset with the triple clamp seemed to really help that a lot. The bike is much more stable at speed. It's a lot easier to deal with in the GPs, and it calmed it down a lot. The chassis at this point with the split clamps helped the compliance. We'll also be trying here soon Ride Engineering clamp, which is a 23.5 offset on this bike, and I think that's coming soon. If I'm not mistaken, we should be doing that here in the next few weeks. I run a progressive steering damper, which if you're familiar with those, it's a really cool design. Mounts to the center of the handlebar, really light, really easy to deal with. I've been a Scott's guy for years, which Scott's a fantastic product, and I never intended to switch. And the only reason I bought this thing was because they weren't going to have one ready for a few months, and I bought this, and it's a great product. I love the way it mounts. The machine work is high quality, the fitment is really high quality, and it works really well. The high-speed circuit in particular seems to work better than my Scott's did. Not that the Scott's was bad, but it seems like the high-speed damping in this thing is a little heavier, and at least for me, it's a little more secure when the thing starts to get away from you at speed. Another thing that we did to try and just soften up the chassis, we've been doing some engine mount stuff with a couple different brands. Where I landed with this at the moment is Works Chassis Lab. They have several different options for the engine mounts, and if you're not familiar with the engine mounts, it's basically the hangers here on top where it mounts from the frame to the engine, and then on some bikes you can have a front one too, but the KTM one is fixed. So on the KTM, you're basically just dealing with the top mounts. And the Works Chassis Lab has multiple options. They have soft, medium, hard, all kinds of different options for you. I went out, tested. We had another brand on initially, which were good, and I had been running them for a while, and I just wanted to mess around with some different options. And we messed around with a soft option from Works Chassis Lab and a medium option, and I landed on the medium, which we're currently running. So I've got about a day on these. And so far, so good. It seems to give the bike so far the best it's felt. And if I had to describe what these things do, because there's a lot of questions about all this stuff. What does it do? And am I going to be able to feel that? It's kind of like instead of when you hit a bump, your bike like pings and deflects off something. It makes the chassis feel a lot more dead. Like if you took a ball peen hammer and hit a hard, like a metal surface with it, and the hammer bounces off of it, and then you take a plastic dead blow and hit the same surface with it, That's kind of the best way that I can describe it. It just kind of settles everything down, gives you a lot more comfort. How it affects front grip is really interesting between the softs and the mediums and that type of thing. And you kind of got to talk to some different people and utilize the ones that somebody close to your skill level and on your bike that's going to be similar to you. The mediums for me, with my skill level and everything, felt great. This is exactly where I wanted to land. You can also get improvements, and there's numbers like this printed all different websites. We've done some testing on it and things like that, and just playing around with torque numbers on your existing engine mounts. I had really good luck with a reduced torque number on my swing arm pivot at 70 foot-pounds. Was a pretty big difference. And another thing that we did with the chassis, which again, there's a lot of question marks about these products, but in my opinion, in my experience, they work really well, are the floating axle blocks for the KTMs. It's a really inexpensive mod. It really helps on acceleration bumps and things like that. And if you take your split clamps and your engine mounts and your axle blocks and your torque, and everything is kind of headed in the direction to calm the chassis down and settle it down and make it more compliant for off-road racing. I think what we're really seeing with these bikes now is the bikes are coming more and more rigid every year as the focus on Supercross gets more and more. So as off-road racers, we're needing to take them and pull them back quite a bit. And it seems to be more prevalent every year with the different bikes. So what I'm hearing is the new Yamaha chassis is stiffer, the new Kawasaki chassis is stiffer, so we'll be really curious to get into the 24s and see if the same type of things that we've had to deal with the new KTM that we're going to have to deal with these other bikes as well. The bikes come out really good and they work well. They're just not as comfortable, I guess, as the old one. And it's definitely, all these parts have pointed it in the right direction to where it's a much better race bike for me at this point. Another thing, obviously, is skid plates. Stock skid plate on these bikes are really good. I felt no reason to change that. It has a good frame mount. I'm actually running stock handlebars with X-Trig PHDS mounts, which are just like a rubber mounted system to take some of the shock out of the handlebars. Those worked really well. What else? Oh, engine characteristics. So stock, the engine on this thing, in my opinion, is excellent. It's probably the best engine I've ever had on any 450 that I've owned right out of the box. And I was actually very happy with it stock. I run stock pipe and everything. I ran it in map 2. Don't mess around with traction control really. And I had really good results with it. I just wanted more of what it already did. So I started kind of looking at things to give it more of what it was already doing for me. The first thing that we did is I looked at, read a bunch of reviews on exhaust pipes. What I was reading about the FMF system seemed like what I wanted. I purchased the stainless FMF system, which you can get from your KTM dealer. Stainless stuff, it just seems to be a little bit more durable for me and less money without any performance loss or anything other than weight. It weighs more than the carbon system. This was a really impressive pipe. The head pipe in particular, I did a test with stock silencer. I put the head pipe on first with the stock silencer, and it was so good I almost just left it alone and sold my FMF silencer, but I gave the FMF silencer a try, and again, it was a bump up in the same direction. It was definitely worth keeping, but the head pipe in particular was very impressive. If you like torque and bottom power and really smooth delivery with a lot of power, that's what this bike feels like. Map 2 with this pipe is excellent. Everybody that's ridden the bike says the same thing about it. It's super easy to use. It has a lot of power, but it's never surprising, never abrupt. Has really good roll on, all that kind of thing. The FMF system was really, really positive. Another thing I did that you can get out of the KTM accessory catalog is a vented airbox cover. And again, it just gives the power, it gives it more of what it already has. Doesn't make a hit or turn it into a dragster or anything like that. Just more seamless, big torquey power, which is really good. The other part that I really like to run, which is controversial at best, is Recluse auto clutches. And if you've ever gone online and read anything about a Recluse auto clutch, it is a pretty divisive topic. which is shocking to me that a motorcycle part could be such a thing. But for me personally, I have a bad wrist that I've broken multiple times, and my hand goes numb, and I have a lot of injuries with it. So when my hand goes numb, which is virtually every time I ride, being able to not have to cover the clutch is a big deal for me. I can ride with my hand on the bar. I don't feel the need to cover the clutch always, although I still do use it to disengage on corner entrances and to add power and feed power into things like that. It's almost a bit of a safety device for me, and I've gotten to the point where I want them on any bikes that I get. So yeah, proceed with caution on Recluse auto clutches. I am a huge fan. If you go through all of our crew that have ridden my bike and ridden our various test bikes, you'll get radically different answers. But for me personally, they work awesome, and I almost won't own a bike without one at this point. One of the last things, which was a big mod for me, seat concepts, tall seat. If you have leg injuries, I have had leg injuries. I have screws in my ankles and one of my knees. I recently had a really bad break of my left leg, and I've been coming back from that for about a year. I'm about 6 feet tall, and a tall seat for me is a big energy saver. It just puts my leg at less of a severe angle and allows me to get up off the seat easier. It's almost become a necessity on any of the bikes that I have with the condition of my legs and stuff. This particular seat is a complete seat from Seat Concepts. It comes just as you see it. The base fit perfectly. The seat bolted right on. A lot of times if you get aftermarket seats, they can be a little janky on the fitment. This was not. The cover is excellent. The density of the foam is excellent. There's only one thing I don't like about this seat, and it's got this weird hump in the back that I feel like that could blend in better with the fender. Other than that, it's an excellent product and I love it. Lots of different seats on the market. If you've never ridden with a tall seat, they kind of take a minute to get used to. It feels like you're sitting way up high. But you have to really balance, like, if you feel like it takes away from your cornering or what have you, you just kind of have to mess with it a little bit. Me personally, I feel like it takes away anywhere, and it just saves a lot of fatigue and makes it easy for me to get up off. One of the major things with any bike that you're going to get is getting the suspension set up properly for your weight, riding, so on and so forth. This bike is no different. There's been a lot of talk about the leverage and stuff being different on these, and compared to the old bike, it's actually the same. Because of the frame stiffness, it just feels completely different from the rear and how it works and where they move the swing arm pivot and that type of thing. It works completely different. There's a new design to this shock, it's a good shock, nothing wrong with it. New piston in the shock as well that we've come up with some good settings with, and I actually prefer the new piston. I was running the old piston in this newer shock for a while, and we switched back, and the new piston design is actually better in my opinion. Really good results out of the shock. Make sure you get the proper spring rate on it for your weight. Fork stuff. Another divisive topic is air forks versus spring forks. I'll add to that a little bit myself. So I have been running air forks I had a 2018 250XC 2-stroke, so from 2018 through to now. I've always had good success working with and valving my air fork. I love the light feel of the front end. I love the adjustability, the variety of races that we go to. We can go to a full sand track and I can add pressure, which if you're familiar with how that works, it's basically like adding preload / spring rate without having to take your fork apart. I have been testing back and forth with a set of KYB inserts in another set of forks that I built, which are good, and there's a lot of people that prefer those back to back with the air fork. For me personally, I still prefer the setup that I have for the air fork. So that's what's back on the bike at the moment, but I've been going back and forth between the two. Lots of options if you want to do a spring conversion with the front. You can do a standard spring setup, which is just a single-sided, takes your air cartridge out and puts a coil spring in one side, and you use the existing damper cartridge. There's some different insert kits from WP, like 6500 kits and things like that, all the way up to KYB inserts from Technical Touch, and then all the way up to the full-on whiz-bang forks from WP and so forth and KYB if you want to spend that kind of money. But at the moment, the best setup that I have is a revalved air fork. Goes to your local friendly suspension tuner that you trust, and work with them closely on this bike because they are a little finicky with suspension setup. The rest of the bike is pretty much stock. Like I said, we'll be messing with some different triple clamps here in about a month or so, a couple weeks hopefully. And beyond that, the bike has the same type of really good KTM reliability that I like, and I haven't any issues with it. I'm about 65 hours in on it at this point with zero issues with it, other than chain sliders and some weird stuff like that. But excellent bike for me, the KTMs I always seem to like. So hope everybody has fun, and hope some of this information helps anybody out there that's struggling. Thanks.
If you liked what you saw in this video, come check us out over at dirtbiketest.com on the webs. We have bike tests, product tests, a lot of fresh dirt, and you can even support us by clicking through our links. Hopefully we'll see you out in the trail.